A war within a nation can be an advantageous thing for a foreign power, as another state leaves the Union, and a foreign government takes a stance this week during the Civil War. On May the 3rd, Lincoln calls on volunteers for 3 years this time. Doing this, he doubles the regular standing army, calls on an additional 42,000 new volunteers. Though these new volunteers are under state government's control. May the 4th, General Order Number 15 is issued on this subject. The President of the United States having called for a volunteer force to aid in the enforcement of the laws and the suppression of insurrection, to consist of 39 regiments of infantry and 1 regiment of cavalry, making a minimum aggregate of 34,506 officers and enlisted men, and a maximum aggregate of 42,034 officers and enlisted men. The following plan of organization has been adopted. Arkansas on May the 6th will vote to leave the Union. This isn't that surprising. They have already tried to. The day after Lincoln took office, there was a vote to leave the Union, but many Unionists showed up and voted to stay within. Now, after Lincoln's call for men and preemptive action by the governor, a new vote is held. The vote is 65-5. And with that, Arkansas leaves the Union. Though in an effort for the state to show unity, they asked the 5 who voted against to change their minds after the fact. Only one doesn't. Who was the one who voted to stay? It was none other than future Governor Isaac Murphy. I'm aware he's a controversial figure, with some saying he was behind the Huntsville massacre. To go something less controversial, interestingly, it would be the first state to be readmitted back into the Union. The state of Tennessee schedules a vote for secession after it adopts its own ordinance of secession. On the 9th, there is the Battle of Gloucester Point, firefight between the gunboat USS Yankee and naval battery off the coast of Virginia. Next up, and the final topic of this week, is the British. Despite some of the things I'm going to talk about will happen after this week, now seems like a good time. And Britain takes a strong stance of neutrality. This is actually more important, more exciting, and more diverse than many think. First, while the aristocrats and leaders of Britain were more pro-South, the general populace was pro-North. You see, the aristocrats, well, they were going through their Industrial Revolution, which include the need for large amounts of cotton to help make a lot of their clothing, which were processed in factories run by these aristocrats. Not to mention, they would be happy to see a democracy fail. Again, this is a war less than 100 years after the end of the American Revolutionary War, and democracy is a very threatening thing to the powers in Europe. But the populace were more pro-North because they saw slavery as a moral problem, as England many decades earlier had abolished the practice. Now, if you could indulge me for a second, I would like to look at the careful wording of Queen Victoria's response to the Britain's declaration of neutrality. Whereas we are happily at peace with all sovereign powers and states, and whereas hostilities have unhappily commenced between the government of the United States of America and certain states styling them as the Confederate States of America, and whereas we, being at peace with the government of the United States, have decided our royal determination between a strict and partial neutrality in the contest between the said contending parties, we there have thought it fit, by and with the advice of our Privy Council, to issue this, our royal proclamation. We do hereby strictly charge and command all our loving subjects to observe the strict neutrality and endure in the aforesaid hostilities, to abstain from violating or judging either the laws and statutes of the realm in the behalf or the law of nations in relation thereto, as they will answer to the contrary at their peril. Queen Victoria, 30th of May, 1861. First, do you see how it never takes a direct stand on if the Confederate States are legitimate or not? By using such words as styling, they never do take a direct stance on it, and can't face the anger of the United States or the Confederate States. This neutrality also allows them to sell to, make money off of both sides. The 1853 pattern Enfield is a common weapon on both sides and is directly imported from England. Part of this neutrality was, cotton was very important to the British economy, as I said earlier. It fueled their Industrial Revolution. But food imports from America was also important. This divisiveness even showed in some supporters. The British Prime Minister, Lord Henry John Temple, recipient of the most noble order of the Garter, most honorable order of Bath, member of the Privy Council, Lord Palmerston, who was of Confederate sympathy, found African slavery abhorrent. Britain has been calling on nations such as the U.S. to fight the illegal transatlantic slave trade, which was banned in 1807. Britain, besides being a weapons zero, would also remain a threat to the Union, until a famous proclamation a few years down the line. In fact, the reason for a lot of campaigns in the early time was to gain support from Britain. You see, if the Confederates could bring Britain or another major European power in to mediate the conflict, they could pretty much keep their independence. This foreign diplomacy between the main two combatants of the war and the British would be filled with misstep, affair, and actions. Though the Confederacy, from this status of neutrality, is granted the status of belligerent, allowing them to get these weapon imports. And that brings the week to an end. Another state leaving, and the foreign nation taking a controversial stance of neutrality. Though I'm being very judgmental on Britain, this is a civil war, everything is controversial. See you next week.